It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. It is a Vibe Check Tuesday. It's also an Overreaction Tuesday. Linnell at 5:30. Former NFL Executive of the Year, Andrew Brandt at 5:15. But pretty much until then, it is your calls at 301-230-0980. That is the Ace Law listener line. If you're in a wreck, Ace Law helps you get a check. Call 8888. Ace Law. All right, let's go to the phones, and let's start off with Steve. Steve, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, how you doing? I really didn't think that Ben Johnson was going to come here from day one, and the reason why I thought that is because when Commanders hired that Eugene Shen guy, the analytics guy, he has affiliation with the Ravens. And I just think he has a lot more influence than people know. And I just think this team would do better with McDonald and Weaver as opposed to a Ben Johnson. I just think that they've been in that Ravens structure for a while, and this is what this team needs more than anything else.
All right, thanks for the call, Steve. I don't think it's like conspiratorial in the way that Steve said that, I didn't think Ben Johnson would come here because of the Ravens ties. Ben Johnson made his own. Here's what I think happened with Ben Johnson. I didn't say this in the first segment. I should have. I think Ben Johnson, in his heart of hearts, doesn't want to leave. I think Ben Johnson is acting like a person who was like, if someone pries me out of this job with an offer that I can't refuse, and I'm just going to keep, when you don't want to do something, and you just keep putting conditions on it, and then people call your bluff. It's like, I don't really want to go out tonight. Well, come pick you up. Okay, well, I don't really want to, I got to be home by this time. All right, well, we'll drop you back off. It's not a big deal. I'll pay for your Uber. It's like, and it's like, bro, if you don't want to go out, just say you don't want to go out. Like, you can stay home. It'll be cool. It'll be fine. And that's what it sounds like, is Ben Johnson was like, because you got these reports from Schefter and Josina Anderson. Some teams were spooked by his price. And I think Ben Johnson was like, I really don't want to be head coach. I kind of like it here in Detroit. I'm comfortable. And so he asked for $15 million. And teams were like, okay, we'll give you 15. And then he was like, well, I want personnel control. And then teams were like, wait a second. I don't know that this is the case, but it feels like a guy who then, when he realized this morning was the day, he woke up this morning and was like, I'm really interviewing for this, and they're going to offer me a contract. They're going to offer me the things that I say I want, and I don't really want them. And I don't have to turn them down if they never come here. And so he got on the phone with his agent and had a conversation, and eventually this is the result. And the timing is terrible, and I will say it feels very unprofessional, but at least he didn't waste their time in an interview. So Aaron Glenn gets his interview in Detroit, and the Commanders will go back to Ashburn later, and they'll circle up and make their decision. But at the end of the day, this Ben Johnson felt like a guy who didn't want to go anywhere. And that's why he turned down Washington, why he took his name out of Washington. I should say took his name out of Washington, took his name out of Seattle, because he didn't want to go anywhere. But I do think, to Steve's other point, Eugene Shen is a big factor here, and that Ravens know-how, and a guy, Mike McDonald, who has been in that Ravens system. People keep throwing out the idea that McDonald would leave Baltimore for DC or Weaver would leave with McDonald. I don't know that that's the case. Now, the Ravens defensive backs coach is probably the next up as the DC there, not Weaver. So maybe they could get him with the DC title here, but he is the assistant head coach there. So it is something to kind of keep in mind before people start going 2-for-1 special on that. All right, let's go to Mark in Largo at 301-230-0980. Mark, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, what's up, Craig? Hey, how you doing, Craig? You know what I love about you, man? You're taking this so mature. I wish you could have a conversation with Grant and Danny right now, and I know you're younger than both of them, but this has gotten so personal that people are now attacking Ben Johnson personal, and I think people need to leave it alone. He made a decision, move on from it, okay? I hate when people start doing this, but let me throw out a name that I don't think this is far-fetched, but I think is a possibility. The first name I was going to throw out was Bobby Sloyd, but you kind of poo-pooed that.
Yeah, and to be clear, hold on, real quick, Mark. I didn't poo-poo it. Michael Phillips reported it as unlikely. Slowick would actually be right there with Mike McDonald for me as the guy. We had Nick Wagner on the show a couple weeks ago who covers the 49ers.
What about Eric Bieniemy?
Why would you want Eric Bieniemy?
I'm just asking. I'm asking.
I have been pretty clear on this.
I agree with you on Bobby Slowick.
I have been pretty clear on this. And Mark, I guess yesterday you might have been listening to the show down the hall when I said this.
I'm sorry, bro.
But it's okay. I don't expect everyone to listen every day. I have said I am not taking any more Eric Bieniemy calls because I will lay it out because just like you, not everyone listens every day, so I don't expect everyone to have heard this. But my simple explanation is this: Eric came here to do a job. That job was the most power that he had ever had. Yeah. He failed. Now, there are a million reasons why he failed. Many of, if there's a million reasons, let's say 600,000 even weren't his fault. Yeah. But the 400,000 he controlled, that's a lot of reasons, were bad.
Slowick could be perfect.
So, I like Slowick a lot.
The reason why I like Slowick, and I thought Slowick was better than Ben, because if you were going to draft Jayden Daniels at number 2, what better person you would have than Bobby Slowick, who's worked with C.J. Stroud already, so he's very familiar with C.J. Stroud. Bobby would know how to deal with someone like a Jayden Daniels and work with him and go from that point on. But you really need to have a conversation with your counterparts when you see them on Friday, because they are losing it.
We're gonna put that verse in 106.7 versus the Team 980 after all. Mark, I appreciate the call. Later. Thank you. Again, don't forget, Friday, it is 106.7 The Fan versus the Team 980 live on air, on stage, off air. Make sure you get that right. On stage, off air, and completely uncensored. So that will be Friday. It's presented by M Street Bank, and tickets are available now at BethesdaTheater.com. All right, let's keep going let's get one more in this segment, but if you're on hold and I'm not about to call your name, stay tuned, /stay on hold, because we have a ton more time to take calls, and that's basically what we're doing the whole hour at 301-230-0980. Let's go to Sharon. Sharon, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Thank you for taking my call. I just want to say that I'm glad that he did not take the job or do the interview, because I think that, for me, I believe that he did not want the pressure that was going to come along with being the head coach. And because of that, he decided to stay in Detroit, where he was comfortable, like you said, and that's, I believe, like you said, that maybe he is not the leader that we all probably think that he is. And so, therefore, the pressure in some ways got to him, and he said, I'm going to stay here in Detroit where I am the most comfortable. I don't want those headaches, because if he had came here and things did not work out and it was a failure, he's still another reason why he did not want that added pressure. I'm going to stay here, try to finish the job here at Detroit. Hopefully that he's thinking that we can get back next year and the job be completed. And that's one of the reasons why I think that he did not come to Washington or have an interview with Washington or Seattle.
No, it's a great call, Sharon. Thank you. And to be clear, I don't know whether this is the way Sharon meant it, but this is the way I took it, and this is the way I agree with Sharon. That's not a bad thing if that's what Ben Johnson did. He actually did everybody a favor. Because if you take a job that you're not ready for, like, anxiety is real. Like, we do forget sometimes, and Michael said this on the YouTube stream earlier, and I appreciated him saying this. We sometimes forget that even the coaches, like, we talk about it sometimes with the players, these are young men, whatever. These coaches are human beings. And, like, Ben Johnson's not that different in age from me. He's a little bit older, but he's in his late 30s. I believe, McDonald's 36. These are human beings, and they have anxieties and fears and all of these things. Just because they're football coaches, they're still humans, and you have to be ready for that moment. And if you're not ready to put yourself in it, means you're going to fail. And that's not something that you should do to yourself, and it's certainly not something you should put an organization through. So if he woke up this morning and was like, I can't do this, then while this sucks and it's unprofessional in the sense that you would have really preferred it to be done in a different manner, different timing, before the Commander's brass is on the freaking plane, it's better than him accepting a job. Like, putting on a face for an interview, doing really well, and accepting a job that he doesn't really want. So in that way, it's a good thing. Of course, if he was ready for it and then just psyched himself out and he would have been the best option, then this sucks. But we won't know because we don't get to live in two universes at once. Sometimes I wish. Sometimes I wish we could play out alternate universes. Sometimes that's for information purposes. Sometimes it's just for humor. Sometimes I'm like, I would like to see this, that, or the other thing. When we get back, DH is on hold. We got a couple other calls as well. So we got some lines open too. So if you would like to get in, 301-230-0980, that Ace Law listener line fired up on a Vibe Check Tuesday on The Hoffman Show. It's The Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And we are streaming live on YouTube too at the Team 980. Right now, we are taking your calls at 301-230-0980. We got another half hour of that at least. Also still to come on the show today, Grant and Danny had Albert Breer, who had some very interesting stuff. We have our own great guests as well. So we'll play some clips from Breer. And then Andrew Brandt joins us at 5:15. And also, we found the clip of Logan talking about Dan Quinn. So I'll squeeze that in at some point as well. But for now, more of your calls, 301-230-0980, starting with DH. DH, thanks for holding through the break there. You are on The Hoffman Show.
Hey, Mr. Hoffman, man. What's going on? How you feeling today, man?
I'm doing good. It's a weird day, but we're hanging in there, you know?
Hey, it's all good, man. Look, I'll say this. Watching the game over the weekend, I was excited because I just knew we were going to have to wait another 2 weeks before we could make Ben Johnson the coach. Just the first half of Detroit, they just looked outstanding on offense, and I was looking forward to it. That was my pick. So to hear the news today, him declining, it was kind of a gut punch, but I think it's because we all set ourselves up that was the guy that we wanted. Your last caller mentioned something about him saying no and maybe not being ready for the leadership role. I just want to say that no is not an indictment on your abilities. Just because you decline it doesn't mean you can't handle the smoke. He truly may just be comfortable in the situation. And the reasons given for him wanting to stay in Detroit is the exact culture of the city of Detroit and Detroit sports, is that they feel as though they have the best opportunity to kind of keep this thing going right now, and he's staying home. He's loyal. That's the traits that they said about him. He's a loyal coach. Okay, he's loyal to his situation right now. And I'll say this, man. When I'm in a job role or something like that, a job may be offering more money. It may be a different situation. But if I'm truly comfortable and steadfast in where I am now, I can stay there. You know what I mean? And the difference between $2 million and $10 million to him might not be a lot. When it comes down to it, money may not be his thing. His thing could be comfort or where he lives or his family, so that could be his thing. I will say this, though. The new regime is not giving any information. I think it's causing the media and the fan base to go crazy, because in the years past, we've always been on the cutting edge of this information and just being able to have this stuff at our fingertips. So I think 90% of the fan base right now is trying to have revisionist history to make themselves feel better. All right. That, Ben Johnson wasn't my guy. I didn't think he could do it anyway. Right. He wasn't a leader. He wasn't this. He wasn't that. When a week ago you were ready to sign him up, you were on board waiting for him too. So let's just slow down. Let's just think, and let's just understand that what we had in the previous regime, they were quick to make bad decisions. Okay, right. This new regime has been better at vetting people and getting the right people for the job. So while we're all pressed that we wanted Ben Johnson, just slow down. Trust the people in charge making the decisions that are not us, and let them make the best decisions for their franchise, because we're just fans. We get to watch it on Sunday and talk about it all week. They're the ones that actually in the building, have to pay these people, and have to be comfortable with the people that they bring in the building. So I'm just the same way I've been since the Harris Group has gotten there. I've just slowed down, pumped my brakes on the fandom, and just allowed them to do their thing. This is their house they're building. Let them build it how they want to and make their own decisions. And I'm just going to trust the people, that's put in charge. And then on Sunday, I'm going to show up and cheer loud and hope we get it done.
DH, Hall of Fame call. Appreciate you. Thank you. Great call. I'm going to react to a bunch of that stuff real quick. So first and foremost, if Ben Johnson, if this is purely pure, right? And Johnson is like, I feel like I have unfinished business. I'm comfortable. I don't care about the money. Like, that's the kind of human that, frankly, we should all ascribe to be. That what drives our so to be people that realize that money and power don't drive happiness. Now, money can buy a lot of things that'll make you happy. Power puts you in control of situations where you don't have to worry about what maybe people over you that you don't agree with all the time think. I'm not saying that you are a terrible person or that if you want money or power or that money or power aren't things that are worth pursuing, professionally speaking. They are. I would love to get to a point in my career where I could be like Dan Le Batard, right? Dan makes a lot of money and he runs his own show. Dan will also be the first one to tell you, and I don't have a relationship with Dan. I've just listened to him say this into microphones on a podcast, one that he owns, but that he didn't realize how much responsibility and weight came with that power. That there are many days that he looks back and wishes he would have just signed another lucrative multi-year deal with ESPN where he didn't have to make decisions and be in charge. And so if Ben Johnson is happy in Detroit, what else do you want but happiness? That is a great lesson in life. He also might have, in the interest of being fair and putting possibilities out there, he might have been scared of the interviews. He might not have interviewed well and known that he wasn't the favorite. And in order to save himself from the embarrassment, quote unquote, of being the favorite to not getting the job, he pulled himself out. Like, we don't know exactly what is going on here, but I do think, regardless, a good lesson to keep in mind for all of us is that money and power don't equate to happiness in a direct line. And if Ben Johnson has that perspective on life, then salute to Ben Johnson. I will also say this on the information side of this, as someone who lived in that world for a while. I think Chime has done, as he always does, has done a tremendous job of being responsible with his words around this, where John has said, the Harris Group isn't giving me anything, but people around the league think it's Ben Johnson. Let me explain to you how that works often. People start connecting dots. That's agents, that's other front office people, that's other coaches, and it's like, I don't know, Washington's the best job, Johnson's the best candidate. It seems like there's mutual interest. I would think it's Johnson. That's one person. You talk to that person, they're like, yeah, I don't know anything, but like, I think it's Johnson. You talk to someone else, same thing. Like, I don't know anything, but all signs are pointing to Johnson. Well, now you've talked to, and let's say isn't a reporter. Three league people talking, and they all are like, well, and person A is like, well, person B and person C said it seems like it's Johnson. So then a reporter calls person A, and it's like, yeah, I don't really know anything personally, but like, I talked to a couple of my buddies, they think it's Johnson. And now all of a sudden you have this narrative that tends to snowball of like, everyone's talking to each other being like, I don't know anything, but I think it's Johnson. And if they all keep telling each other that, eventually enough people say it, it's like, well, it's got to be Johnson. And it really just started with people connecting dots that didn't come from actual information. It just came from logic. And I'm not saying the logic was bad here. Washington was the best job. Johnson was coming out of the season seen as the best candidate. He plays a style that would seem appealing to Adam Peters. And comes from an environment that they're trying to mimic. It made all the sense in the world why he was the number one candidate and why people were connecting those dots. But what no one had was actual information connecting those dots. It's just a bunch of people connecting dots, and eventually you have so many people saying the same thing that the echo chamber actually loses the I don't know anything part, and it just becomes everyone says it's Johnson, so it must be Johnson. Turns out it's not Johnson. We got a couple of more calls, and so let's break now, Ant. We'll hit what's trending quickly. We'll come back. We'll wrap up the hour with some more calls. And we can take action. We're going to blow out Not My Beat today because Andrew Brandt's going to join us at 5:15. So we'll take some more calls at the top of the hour as well. 301-230-0980. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Andrew Brandt in 30 minutes right now. More of your calls, 301-230-0980. Then, of course, the Ace Law listener line. If you're in a wreck, Ace Law helps you get a check. Call 8888. Ace Law. All right, let's go back to the phones, and let's start off with Derek. Derek, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my call. I hope you guys are doing well. I'm not – by the way, I wanted to shout out the two callers before me, Mark and DH. Those were great calls. They were pretty spot on. I think a lot of us or fans are disappointed because the media, like or however you want to phrase that, exactly, they didn't have a lot of information, so they were connecting dots and just people started naming favorites. Ben Johnson will be the favorite, this and that. So everybody thought it was a done deal, so everybody's watching the playoffs and watching Ben Johnson. And they're getting their hopes up that we're flying a plane out there. One of the funny things about everybody reporting that we're flying a plane to Detroit to meet with him is that they forget that McDonald is just up the road.
Right.
So they don't really have to fly a plane over there, you know?
Right. But in fairness, like Dan,
I guess.
Yeah, in fairness, Dan Quinn did fly here. But I think because Detroit, when they scheduled this interview, Detroit was still in the playoffs, and there was a chance that they would be in the playoffs. That it's like, hey, look, especially because we're interviewing not just Ben Johnson but Aaron Glenn. In case you guys need to be preparing for the Super Bowl, we'll fly to you. So it was more of a logistics thing than like, we are bending at the knee for Ben Johnson.
Yes, yeah, and that's ever since those reports came out about flying, that's always what I thought, and I, giggled in the background. I got a lot of friends who were like, "Oh, we're flying to get him in our private jet or whatever it was."
Right.
And I was like, "Hold on, let's not forget the circumstances here."
Right.
And so I wasn't disappointed. He honestly, I kind of categorized him. I didn't have a solid favorite. I categorized him like you and Logan always talk about categorizing the draft prospects into like tiers. So
yeah.
he was in the tier 1, but so was Mike McDonald for me. And at the lower edge of that is Bobby Slowick. And I think one of the two things that Bobby Slowick and Mike McDonald have over Ben Johnson is the culture. Not saying Detroit is not a great culture, but you look at Bobby Slowick, who's in Houston now, but he came from
San Francisco.
Sure. And he was under D'Amico Ryans, who came from San Francisco. And one of the things we know about San Francisco is offensive or defensive, they put out head coaches like it's crazy.
Yeah, they have.
Kyle Shanahan does. And then Baltimore, I mean, who doesn't want to be an organization like Baltimore, Sure. And I know that, I think it was DH, or maybe it was Mark that brought up, the connection with Eugene Chen. I do think I've been thinking about that in the background a lot. Like, I think there is something to be said here about that connection. And, maybe it's not Mike McDonald, because as of right now, I have my tier 1 without Ben Johnson, Mike McDonald and Bobby Slowick, even though I know Michael Phillips said probably not Slowick.
Right.
My tier 2 is Weaver, and it's because of exactly those reasons that you mentioned. Like, I know he's a defensive line, but why does he have the title? It's intriguing that he has the assistant head coach title,
for sure,
as opposed to Mike McDonald. So I'm intrigued by that, but also like I do. As much as I'm not a fan of the retread, I love the idea of Dan Quinn. He's a proven leader and coach, and he's been to the Super Bowl before. And if you give him a second chance, what would he do differently? Seems like he's reflected on that. So I'm not out on Dan Quinn, but I do have other preferences.
And Derek, I appreciate the call. We got a couple more, so I'm gonna cut you off there. But I appreciate you obviously listening to not just the show, but to Take Command as well with Logan, and I'll actually get to what Logan said about Dan Quinn on Take Command in a second. I will say the Eugene Chen thing, like Mike McDonald has been with the Ravens for a long time, but Eugene Chen left them in 2019, and at that point in his career, Mike McDonald was not very far up the ladder. Like he was still a position coach or an assistant position coach. So I don't know how much like the VP level data guy was working with an assistant position coach and a coaching intern at the start of Eugene Chen's run in Baltimore versus maybe a position coach by the end. Maybe, Because maybe Mike McDonald was a young guy that like really got it, was someone who could translate that stuff to the players. Maybe. And clearly there's familiarity, friendships, network stuff. But I don't want to read too much into that. And here's I think the more important thing out of Derek's call that I want to point out. I think part of the reason I liked Ben Johnson so much as a candidate is because of Detroit's culture. Not to say that I don't love San Francisco and I don't love Baltimore, but Detroit, they flipped the culture in the way that it needs to be flipped here. And it started in part with ownership change. Like there was a change in who was in charge in the Ford family. That the new person brings in Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, and they take a franchise that had been like a sad organization for like 60 years. And they flip it like that in 3 years to one of the best teams in the NFL. I want a guy who's been there for that. That's intriguing to me. That is a feature, not a bug. But by the same token, Ravens and Niners, can you create that here? But I would be a little bit scared of kind of what happened to Eric. Bieniemy comes in and he's like, "This is the way we do it," and you gotta know how to massage that culture and build a ramp. You can't just jump because people fall through the crack, if you will. Let's go to Marcus real quick. Marcus, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Thanks, Craig. Enjoy your show a lot.
Thank you.
Curious to get you to expand on Dan Quinn a little bit. Fans hate the idea on social media right now. People are talking about not being fans anymore and that he's a Ron Rivera clone and all that. So I'm hoping you can expand a little bit on your knowledge of him and why you think that all those people are wrong and that he might actually be a good hire.
So I will say a couple things real quick, and then we have the bite from Logan, which is more than I could ever say because Logan played for the guy. The number one thing I would say different in terms of Rivera versus Quinn is Dan Quinn is a man and a coach of substance. Like I think Ben Standig's story in The Athletic when Ron got fired, and frankly Ron's own interview with John Chime exposed exactly what the biggest flaw with Rivera is. That despite the fact that he is a way smarter football guy than a lot of people give him credit for, he was a narrative chaser and he was a headline chaser. And not that he wanted attention, but he allowed the narrative to impact how he coached and the decisions that he made and the way he treated people. That's a crappy way to be a head coach. And it's an especially bad way, like ineffective way. When I say crappy, it's not an indictment of character. I don't think it's great, but I mean that in terms of efficacy. And it's a really ineffective way to do it, especially in a market like DC. And let's be honest about this market. The media is different here. I don't necessarily, I'm a part of it, so I'm not going to be like, oh, it's awful, the terrible media, and pretend like I'm not a part of it. I try to do the job in the way that I think it should be done, and I would do the job the same. I do the job the same way here that I did in Dallas and that I would do if I got a job anywhere else in the country, to be very clear. But there is this political media crossover that there's a lot of talk about narratives, and there's a lot of talk about who's up and who's down and the horse race versus the substance. It's my biggest complaint, frankly, about political media is politics is supposed to be about what we have in our, like what the legislators are doing to that affects all of our lives. These laws aren't about the senators and the Congress people. It's about us. And how does it affect me if this healthcare bill passes or this immigration bill passes? But so much of the political coverage is about what it means for the elected officials. And I think a lot of times, instead of talking about the substance here, it's about the power structures in the narrative. And so if you constantly chase that as a head coach, then you're not going to succeed in a market like DC. I don't think that's a problem for Dan Quinn. I think he is an incredibly bright football mind who has been innovative and shown his way that he can adapt. Like, he doesn't run the same cover 3 stuff he ran in Seattle and Dallas. And he has found ways to create superstars in all those places, whether it's Micah Parsons, obviously Diggs in Dallas, amongst others, Deron Bland the year he had this year. And I know there's some risk reward there, but like he had a historic season. Obviously the Legion of Boom in Seattle, like he has done it. And he did coach a team to a Super Bowl in a much smaller window than than Ron did in Carolina. And I think he looks back with some reflection about what he did post Kyle and the way that he got in trouble in this reflective way that would not make him repeat the same mistakes, where Ron literally tried to run it back with the same people. And that is why the comparison of the two, to me, is nonsensical, even if they're both quote-unquote retreads. I asked Logan about this on Take Command, about 12 days ago. Here's what Logan said about his former head coach in Atlanta.
Dan Quinn, head coach candidate. How do you like him?
I mean, I can't say enough good things about Dan. I think when I went to Atlanta, it was like a breath of fresh air for me in my career. And quite honestly, because he just did such a good job of creating like one of the best cultures I've ever been around. Like, it was so fun to come to work. It was so fun to be a part of his vision. He cared about the players. He's passionate about the players. Obviously, he's a smart football guy. But, I can't speak to McDonald and what he does, right, and how the guys like him. But having been a player for Dan, I know he just builds relationships at the highest level, and I know he has a really good relationship with Kyle. Kyle's got a great relationship with Adam. So I think like when you're getting a referral from Kyle Shanahan, I think that's a big deal. I also think, one of the things I brought this up a couple times on the show, and to me, it's one of the most valuable things that he's done. Like, despite all the stuff he did for me in Atlanta, what I saw him do with the team there, like, after he got fired, I remember he called me and said, I'm trying to figure things out, like where I went wrong. And like that reflectiveness, that growth mindset, I think is so important. So I don't think he's going to make the same mistakes that he made in Atlanta. And I think he's going to he's just a good dude, man. Good dude, awesome coach. Can't say enough positive things about him. I think the team would be very lucky to have him here. Obviously, he's a little bit older, and is this the right fit for what Josh Harris wants with Adam? I don't know. And so that's, again, something that goes through in the interview process. But in terms of building a culture, a positive work environment, you're going to be hard pressed to find a guy better than that in terms of building relationships with players. So again, like, it's more than that. It's, again, does the vision align with what they're trying to do in the front office here? But in terms of that kind of stuff, he's excellent.
Well, I mean, if you don't like Dan Quinn after that, I don't think I'm going to be able to convince you. One thing I will underscore there is the relationship with Kyle. And so when Dan Quinn goes to hire an offensive coordinator, I do think that he will be looking at that Shanahan tree. And I think he could probably poach someone from San Francisco. Obviously, Adam Peters can be helpful there. Could he poach someone else from a similar tree? Someone from McVay's tree, someone, who's working for Kevin. Like, it's going to be a challenge. And if you strike great success, are you going to lose that guy? Yes. But I think Dan Quinn understands that, and he knows he's got to have a succession plan that's better than, we're going to go hire Steve Sarkisian, which is what he did last time, and kind of chased a name and a good OC, but not one that was from the same tree and that could keep the continuity. But then again, as the Eagles just proved with Nick Sirianni, like, Nick Sirianni had to replace his coordinators, and he's an offensive guy, and he tried to just have the next guy up, and the next guy wasn't up for the job in Brian Johnson. So definitely going to be interesting to watch, but Dan Quinn certainly, I think, is a better candidate than a lot of people are giving him credit for.